I want to tell you a little bit more about the meetings themselves, how the decisions are reached, and how these decisions miraculously become government policy the world over. So let's start with the Bilderberger Conference protocol. Nobody can buy their way into the Bilderberger meeting. It doesn't matter who you are, although needless to say, many very powerful corporations have tried. Now, the group's steering committee decides who to invite. Well, the Guardian newspaper of London aptly calls a Bilderberger person, and their qualifications haven't changed in over 70 years of the secret meetings. Essentially, what they're looking for is one world order enthusiast and a Fabian socialist. Now, what is a Fabianist? Well, Fabianists believe in what they describe as the democratic control of society and all its activity. And the key word here is, needless to say, control. And control of the individual is best achieved through global government. And so, according to the Bilderberger Steering Committee, the invited guests must come alone. No wives or girlfriends or husbands or boyfriends. Personal assistants are invited to the conference, but must eat in a separate hall. The guests are explicitly forbidden from giving interviews to journalists. They're also prohibited from taking pictures and, needless to say, posting them on their social media. And so, to maintain this aura of secrecy, Bilderbergers book an entire hotel for the duration of the conference, usually ranging from 3 to 4, maximum 5 days, with the entire building being cleared of all other guests by the Secret Service to ensure complete privacy and safety for the delegates. Now, all drawings of the layout of the hotel are classified, staff is thoroughly vetted, their loyalty questioned, the backgrounds verified, and political affiliations checked. Any suspect ones are removed for the duration of the event. Now, the host national government takes care of all the security concerns of the attendees and, needless to say, their entourage, and also pays the security costs to protect the intimacy and privacy of the all-powerful world elite. Bilderbergers hire their own chefs and cooks and waiters and secretaries, telephone operators, busboys, cleaning staff, and, needless to say, security personnel. The Bilderberger group pays for the delegates and also guest accommodations, and it's always a 5-star, some of the best hotels in the world. And also, Michelin chefs prepare the food. In fact, one of the criteria in choosing the hotel is the availability of some of the best and most renowned chefs, who, needless to say, are also sworn to secrecy. Now, the other is the size of the town, always a small town away from the spotlight of the big city and curious people. Now, all in all, about 120 to maximum 130 delegates are invited to the conference. 1/3 of the attendees are from the United States, the rest are from Europe and Canada. Latin American, Asian moguls belong to other organizations, and later on, in the later episodes, I'll explain to you who they are and how they work. Now, the guests usually arrive on a Wednesday. Meetings begin on a Thursday early in the morning. There are 4 daily sessions, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, except for Saturdays when there's only morning session. Now, on Saturdays, the Bilderberger conference officially ends at midday, and between midday and 3 or 4 or 5 p.m., the Bilderbergers, they play golf, they swim, they have company. Obviously, the organizers on an organized, be it a boat cruise or some kind of a helicopter ride. The seating plan is in a rotatable alphabetical order. For example, one year, Umberto Agnelli, the now deceased chairman of Fiat, might sit at the front row because his last name begins with the letter A. And the next year, you may have someone like Klaus Zimwinkel, a former chairman of Deutsche Post and Deutsche Telekom, might take his place because, again, his last letter begins with a Z. So one year, all the A's sit at the front, the next year, all the Z's sit at the front, and so on and so forth. So each country sends a delegation of typically 3 persons. You have an industry or business leader, a top-level minister, or a senator or a congressman, and also an intellectual, some kind of a chief editor of a leading periodical. The United States has the most participants because of its size. Smaller countries like Greece and Denmark and Portugal, therefore they have most 2 delegates. Now, Mexican globalists, they also belong, but not to the Bilderberger, but to the Trilateral Commission, and we get to them a little bit later. 1/3 of the delegates are from government and politics, and the remaining 2/3 are from the industry and finance, education, labor, communications, and more delegates, needless to say, are fluent in English, with French being the second language of choice. So that takes care of the conference protocol. Now let's talk about the Bilderberger rules of procedure. The Bilderberg Group, from its inception, has been administered by a small nucleus of persons appointed since 1954 by a committee of what they call wise men, which is made up of a European chairman, both the European and US Secretary General, and a treasurer. So you're talking about 5 people. That's the Council of the Wise Men. The annual invitations, according to a Bilderberger official press release, are only sent out to what they call important and respected people who, through their special knowledge, personal contacts, and influence in national, also international circles, can amplify the objectives and resources of the Bilderberger Group. Now, Bilderberger meetings follow a traditional protocol founded over 100 years ago, back in 1919, at the Paris Peace Conference held in Versailles for the Royal Institute of International Affairs, based in Chatham House in London. Now, while the name Chatham House is commonly used to refer to the institute itself, the Royal Institute of International Affairs is the foreign policy executive arm of none other than the British monarchy. And according to the Royal Institute of International Affairs procedures, when a meeting is held under the Chatham House rules, participants are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speaker or speakers, nor that of any other participant, may be revealed publicly, nor may it be mentioned that the information was received at the meeting of the institute itself. And so the founders of the Bilderberg Group based their meetings on the Chatham House rule because, well, you see, this allows people to speak as individuals and also to express views that, let's say, may not be those of their organizations, of their countries, or their political parties, while at the same time encouraging free discussions. It makes sense if you're the Bilderbergers. You see, people usually feel more relaxed if they don't have to worry about their reputation or the implications that they're publicly quoted. And so the Chatham House rule guarantees anonymity to those speaking within its walls in order to promote the international relations. In fact, Chatham House can take the disciplinary actions against any of the members who break the rules. And so each Bilderberger meeting is set up with short introductions on the chosen topic, followed by a general debate. And each panel consists of a moderator and 2 or 3 other people. You have in total 6 panels with 3 members in each, and they lead the discussion. And each panel lasts for about 2 hours. After an introductory speech of about 10 minutes, the rest of the participants choose what they want to, or when they want to enter the debate, or whether they want to speak for 1, 3, or 5 minutes by raising 1, 3, or 5 fingers. Now, 1-minute speakers, for obvious reasons, get to speak first, and then you have discussion questions lasting for 5, 3, or 1 minute. There are no introductory documents. There are no records, although the delegates are required to prepare for the discussions in advance, and the initial list of proposed participants is circulated as early January, with a final selection being made by the steering committee sometime in March. And so, to avoid infiltration, the Bilderberger steering committee, they set the date for the meeting way in advance, but the name of the hotel is not announced until 1 week before. What they usually do, in fact, they book 3 or 4 different hotels around the world to make sure that people who actually, like me, who are trying to figure out where these people are going to be meeting, have a harder time of actually finding out their meeting spot. We usually do anyway, because we have people on the inside who are members of the Bilderberg Group, who, needless to say, are pretty concerned about the proceedings themselves. They understand the objectives of the Bilderbergers, who always get a tip from these people, but on that later. And so at the opening of the meeting, the chairman recalls each and every time the Bilderberger rules of procedure, and then turns to the first item on the agenda. Bilderberger marks all distribution material to its members personal and strictly confidential and not for publication. It's important to distinguish between active members who assist annually and those who are only invited once in a while. So you have about 80, 90, 100 members over the years, because again, remember, we're talking about 130 annual members. Bilderberg has been around for 70-some years, since 1954. And so a lot of these members, like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger's, et cetera, they're annual attendees. Then you have, of course, the fringe people who are invited to report maybe on a subject related to the sphere of influence, professional academic knowledge, but they're absolutely clueless about the formal structure behind the Bilderberg Group and remain in absolute ignorance of the group's greater goals and universal objectives. Maybe they should read my book and they'll figure out exactly what's going on behind the scenes. In any case, a select group are invited because Bilderbergers think that these people may be useful tools on their globalist plans and later help to reach very powerful elected positions. And the most, let's say, dramatic example of this very useful recruit was an obscure governor of Arkansas by the name of Bill Clinton, who attended his first Bilderberg meeting in Baden-Baden, Germany, back in 1991. And there, David Rockefeller told Bill Clinton why the North American Free Trade Agreement was such an important Bilderberger priority and that the group needed support. And the next year, Clinton, who absolutely said, David, do you want me to support this if I'm elected president? And David Rockefeller said, absolutely, we do. And Clinton said, absolutely, I will. And so he extended his hand and he shook Clinton's hand and then he said to Bill Clinton, thank you, Mr. President. Well, we know what happened in 1982. Clinton was elected president, and guess what? He became a strong proponent of North American Free Trade Agreement. Well, obviously, every NATO Secretary General has belonged to the Bilderberg Group. And as a note, for example, of interest, in August 1956, Joseph Ratzinger, a Polish Jesuit-trained political heavyweight, wrote on page 11 of the Bilderberg report that this group may be a factory of initiative. We decided, he said, that none of the new ideas and initiatives would be developed by the group itself, but that they should be passed on into some other person or organization who would further develop them. In fact, during the final day of the inaugural 1954 conference, a proposal was submitted on page 8 of the general report by the Bilderberger Steering Committee, whereby the European defense community would be integrated into NATO with an objective of serving, as they said, central organ of decision capable of action in the political and economic as well as military spheres of influence. And thus it was decided at the inaugural 1954 Bilderberg Conference that the Bilderbergers would use NATO alliance to control European affairs. Every prime minister of England for the past 50 years has felt compelled to attend the Bilderberg Conference. In fact, some say that the Bilderberg Group itself is really a creation of Military Intelligence 6, MI6, under the direction of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. And the plan of British intelligence was to get Joseph Ratzinger, who would later become one of the key founding fathers of the European movement, to organize the Bilderberg Group as a kind of real power broker behind the different governments of Europe and also the United States. And so, according to another observer, Ratzinger was funded with secret money from the United States State Department and kept afloat with massive subventions through Thomas Braden, head of the CIA's International Organization Division. And so the Bilderberger Group may in fact be a natural extrapolation of Britain's Coefficients Club, another very secretive organization founded way back when in 1902. And Lord Alfred Milner spoke of his vision for the future during a 1903 meeting of the Coefficients Club at the St. Erman's Hotel over half a century before the Bilderbergers were founded. At the meeting, Milner stressed some very important points. He said, we must have an aristocracy, but not of privilege, but of understanding and purpose, or mankind will fail. And here he said, my peculiar difficulty with democracy comes in if humanity at large is capable of that high education, those creative freedoms our hope demands, much must be done in a much better way and more vigorously so for it to become reality. And if those who have power and leisure now and freedom to respond to imaginative appeals cannot be won to the idea of collective self-development, then the whole of humanity cannot be won to that. And he said, the solution does not lie in direct confrontation with people. We can defeat democracy because we understand the workings of the human mind, the mental hinterlands hidden behind the persona. And so we can put the words of Lord Milner in perspective better by reviewing what Italian industrialist, the late chairman of Fiat, Giovanni Agnelli, had to say. He said, European integration is our goal, and where the politicians have failed, we industrialists hope to succeed, and indeed they have. And so if the MI6 needed a royal face to give the Bilderberger public support and promotional possibilities, what they looked for is for Prince Bernard of the Netherlands, known as a playboy and for his numerous close ties to the European royalty and top industrialists, was in fact an ideal contact man and thus was seemingly given the diplomatic presidency of the Bilderberg group. But in fact, it was Joseph Ratzinger who actually managed the group from behind the scenes until his death on June 12, 1960. And then in 1957, the Bilderberg Conference initiated Dennis Healey into its ranks. And Britain's Healey was often described as the best Labour politician never elected. Its leader, despite standing twice, was a founding member of the so-called European movement promoting understanding and future cooperation of American and European politicians and businessmen to bureaucrats and, needless to say, military leaders. So the group received financial support from a New York-based organization which called itself the American Committee on United Europe. Now, Healy didn't know it at the time, but the group was a CIA front whose leadership included General Donovan, wartime head of the OSS, precursor to the CIA, then Secretary of State George Marshall, and the ubiquitous, later to become the director of the CIA, Alan Dulles. Healy was later appointed as the cabinet minister responsible for all the financial matters, second only to Prime Minister of England in power. And so many believe I may be connecting a remarkable series of coincidences and seeing conspiracies, perhaps, but coincidences grow thicker.